Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bright Side of Beauty podcast, presented by Beyond Skin Aesthetics. We have a wonderful marketing episode here for you today. But before we get started, if you could do me a favor, if you haven't yet, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps out the show so much. I know that I've talked about on previous episodes and over on social channels, we've actually brought most of our marketing in-house. So the only things that we are outsourcing right now are our website and SEO and then our ads. And today I have the guy that is in charge of our ads that keeps us running flawlessly and helps me be as hands-off as possible, keeps me sane, honestly, because I feel like that is the part that just gets too spinning in my brain. So I love being able to be hands-off. Joe Griffin from Dean Garland is here with us. Joe, welcome to the Bright Side of Beauty podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's good to see you, Delaney.
Good to see you too. We always have so much to talk about when we are meeting up and going over our numbers. And so I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about ads in general. I've gotten questions, especially at shows when I'm talking to other business owners and entrepreneurs out there of, should they be running ads? Who are ads right for? Should they outsource? Should they try to do it themselves? So let's just start at the beginning of who is Dean Garland? Who is Joe? How did you get started in marketing and aesthetics? Just give us the whole background. I know that was wide, so tell us whatever you want to tell us.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. We'll start with me and then we'll start with Dean Garland. And by the way, Dean Garland is kind of like my pseudonym name,
Yeah.
just FYI, because everyone's always like, who is Dean? Like, who is this guy? He's not a real person, but I'll explain. But so yeah, my background goes back in digital marketing actually to the 90s. My dad was an entrepreneur. He was like a contractor. And back in the late 90s, the dot-com boom was going on. I was in high school. I was like a junior in high school, and but I was like a computer nerd basically, and I was all over the internet. And so we kind of were like, hey, let's start an internet company. So we started trying a bunch of different internet ideas, crazy stuff. None of them stuck. But one thing that we figured out early on was the way to drive traffic to our websites was through search engines. Old school search engines. I mean, anybody who's been around long enough might remember some of their names, but back in the 90s, it was like Alta Vista and Excite and Hotbot and all kinds of stuff that no longer exist. Yahoo was big and MSN was big, but there wasn't even a Google yet. And so we kind of like got pretty good at making our website come up for keywords on these old school search engines, but the ideas that we had were terrible and they didn't work online. So we were like, wow, we're good at this like search engine submission stuff and like ranking. Didn't even have the name of SEO back then. That name came later. And so we were like, well, we should create a company for this. What would we call this company? Well, back in the day, it was like there was over 900 search engines back then. There was no like prevailing leader. So most of the game was just about getting your website listed with these search engines. They didn't crawl the web the same way they do now. So we called the company submitawebsite.com. And kind of toward 1999, like SEO started becoming a thing and Google came out and like things got a lot more sophisticated. And so we basically turned into one of the first SEO companies. We were like really one of the original SEO companies. We built that business up. We sold that company to web.com, which is also part of Network Solutions. Maybe some people would know who they are. That was a publicly traded company. I was 25 years old when we sold the company. And I worked in that public company. Really cool. We built in that organization the fourth largest search engine marketing agency in the US. And I stayed there till about 2007, 2008. And then I left and started a new SEO agency that was more focused on the enterprise, where we worked across many different industries. Kind of ended up selling that company. But in the process of building that agency, we really became more of a software company. And so we got really heavily into software and product development. And kind of that's where like my technology like side really started to come in more. And ultimately we built one of the largest content marketplaces in the US, and we sold that company to Fiverr in 2019. That company is called ClearVoice, still around. And basically after selling that company in 2019, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I started looking around and found that there was like this kind of Medspa thing that was going on, and like it was getting a lot more popular at that time. All these like treatments were kind of becoming more advanced. It was just becoming more mainstream. I love that idea. So I actually looked at buying a couple of med spas. So that's what got me into this business. I was doing due diligence, understanding, the financials, how the business works, the margins, the scalability, the opportunity, learning about the treatments. And then along came COVID, which kind
Hmm.
of crashed my dreams in terms of owning a med spa. And long story short, rewind about 18 months ago after doing some other offline activities, real estate and things. I was like, I want to get back in the digital marketing game. And I was like, well, what's my brand going to be? Well, this whole time, the company that had owned all the businesses that I operated was like a shell company called Dean Garland. And that was like my like shell company name. And I was like, man, I really love that name. I want to use that as a brand. So we made that an actual brand about 18 months ago. And here we are
So does everyone look at you and say, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you, Dean"? Like, are you just
all the
Dean?
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
that's
even correct them. It's like, yeah,
you're
absolutely. Good
just
to
like,
meet you.
"Yep, that's
Don't
me.
even correct them. Yeah.
I am Dean. Thank you." We
Yep.
actually were connected with you through a referral. So right after you opened, then not right after. How long after you opened did you decide that you were going to have a booth at Aesthetic Next and really take like the plunge
Yeah.
in of getting your name out there? Because you had a
So
massive display.
yeah, yeah, we spent about 6 months literally learning the industry. So we built a
Hmm.
technology platform behind the scenes. We don't actually talk about this a whole lot, but we have a platform called Pulse,
Okay.
which is a global customer analytics database that basically pulls in all the data from our clients in terms of like what ads they're buying and what their performance is, which creative is working. And so what we're trying to build is a replication engine so that ads that work for you, right? I want to be able to
Yeah.
take that same model, whether not now, of course, if it's your proprietary creative, no, right? But the concept of your creative, the concept of your copy, the targeting, et cetera, and replicate that across the country. But then you as a customer benefit, right? If I've got someone in
Hmm.
Beverly Hills and we've unlocked something, I want to bring that to you. So it helps everybody. So we spent like 6 to 9 months basically building what we call a taxonomy, the backend software. There's a whole lot of stuff we built. We didn't actually decide to go to market to acquire customers until July of last year. We picked
Okay.
up a couple. We had 2 or 3 beta customers before that only. So it was
Okay.
July of last year when we were like, we understand this industry, in our opinion, from an advertising perspective, better than anybody. We've got this great technology. We've invested all this time. Now we're ready to go ahead and invest and start going to market. And so the Aesthetic Next was kind of a little bit of our coming out party. That was in
Mhm.
September. Um, but yes, we've been actively marketing for maybe 8 months, our business.
I can honestly say of all of the ads companies that we have worked with when outsourcing, and at this point, I want to say that you are the seventh that we have been working with because we were working with a marketing agency that outsourced ads. And within our time with them, we were working with 4 different agencies alone. So we've been through our experience of these people that say that they understand the industry and advertisements in the industry. And way back, our very first experience with an ads agency, we actually got our Facebook shut down because they said that they understood the
Hmm.
industry, but they weren't following meta rules. And that ended up being a huge no. And we had to completely pivot, which is devastating for business. And when we had our Facebook shut down, it was the height of Facebook. Instagram was just coming onto the scene. So when you think about how businesses were getting their name out there, and this was 2017, 2018. So I mean, it Facebook was the platform people were using. Instagram was getting popular, but it was pretty much like the college kids that were using Instagram, similar to how Facebook originally came onto the scene.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
we had to pivot and create a brand new Facebook account, and so we got a lot more cautious about who we were working with and who we were trusting. And when I say that we are hands off with you, I mean, I feel like every time you have to reach out and be like, "Hey, do you want to go over your numbers? Like they look great. I'm sending them over to you.
Yeah.
Your leads are flowing in. Everything's looking good on our side. We have some ideas. You want to just jump on a call?" And at that point, I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, let's throw some ideas around." But it's not like I'm knocking down your door of like, "What's happening? We need more leads. We need this." It is truly hands off, and as a business, that is so valuable. And it's something that we also talked about was what our strategy was with ads. So I guess before we talk about what the different options are for businesses when they're choosing our ads right for them, who's the right person or like what's the right business to go into using ads? Is there a right business? Is everybody a candidate? What would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I do think that I think there's a level of building your business and your brand before you start doing advertising, actually. And I guess if you have enough funding, it's fine to accelerate your growth with advertising, certainly, like if you've got the cash for it. But um, I feel like it's good to see. I like the idea of like a business kind of getting their legs under them a little bit because you need a little bit of operational chops before you start trying to accelerate your growth too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what advertising does, right? SEO and advertising in particular. It's a growth accelerant. And if you're not in a position, if you don't have kind of some of those things around like how do we onboard new patients? How do we make sure our patients are coming back? Do we have like the right, do we feel good about our customer service? Is our staff fully trained on what our procedures are and how to speak to them? Do we
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to think about what expansion opportunities are when people come in the door? These are a lot of things that you really want to work out. These are the fundamentals you want to work out before you start advertising. And so, there's definitely clinic owners out there that can start a new practice and immediately start advertising and probably do great. But a lot of times what I see is, kind of like roughing out the first $500,000 in revenue, basically
Okay.
without ads or with limited ads, and trying to kind of more organically build the brand and kind of starting a little smaller but building up. So a lot of times I see clinics maybe take a year, 2, even 3 years before I feel like they're a great candidate for advertising, because really from an advertising perspective, between the spin that you're going to have for a specific ad platform and the any budget that you would pay to whoever's managing this for you, like you kind of need about $5,000 a month to really play ball
Mm-hmm.
at a starting point, right? I mean, if you're going to spend, $1,000 a month, let's say, on Google Ads, if you got 3 patients or 4 patients, you're probably doing a pretty good, actually. But that's still not a lot of patients. And, just administrating that and thinking about that and making that part of your business, there's a lot that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be in a little bit farther along where you can support 10 new patients, 8, 10, 20 new patients in a month. From my perspective, that's where you kind of want to start to get it more interested in it.
And then there's many different options and goals that you can have when you're choosing advertisement as your next direction. So something that we talked about was, what is our goal? Is our goal solely patients, getting patients in the door? What type of patients do we want coming in the door? Is it brand awareness? And for us, it was both. So we really focused on what type of advertisement, creative, and offer we were putting out there from there. Can you talk a little bit about that, of what the different options are and maybe who would be the right candidate for each option?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a overall unified agreement that we don't want patients who are just purely price shopping,
Mm-hmm.
which and or patients that may not have loyalty. So I think that's kind of like a pretty universal rule. Most people agree with that. Now, I have seen med spas, I have seen businesses that actually don't care and they've set up their practice in a way where they can basically turn and burn and they're okay with that. And I know that's not a bad thing. It's not the way that most of our clients do business. I don't like judge that model, but I've
Right.
actually seen some. I've been in the back end of some meta accounts where they're spending $100,000 a month on
Mm-hmm.
Meta, and it's one clinic, and they've got like 9 people in there just jamming people out all day long, like literally jamming them
Yeah.
out all day long, and they make a lot of money. So there's a model
Oh.
for, hey, we are the low price leader. You don't need to be loyal. We found a way to make money on that first, procedure, and we're gonna mass do it. Most people don't like that. So what I do think that consumers are used to seeing is some offer. And I think there's a big difference between coming out of the gates with something where you're leveraging maybe incentives that are already provided to you by an Allergan or by, one of these other distributors or pharma companies, right? A lot of them have incentives that they put in place to help clinics acquire new patients. That's why they're there. That's why those incentives are there. And so leveraging those incentives in your marketing it's pretty common. Sometimes I have a conversation where people say, I don't want any kind of patient that's going to maybe have any lack of loyalty or who's price shopping. So I don't want to put any offers out there. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do that, but 100% guaranteed you're going to pay a lot more money for patients. You're going to pay way more for new patients because those lead costs are going to skyrocket. So, the good part is you definitely didn't get a price shopper, but you're probably going to pay twice as much for that patient. I mean, so there's a balance there. So let's just say that. So I think these conversations around what types of patients do we want to acquire, we can all agree we don't want the Groupon buyer,
Mm-hmm.
but there is an offer out there that they expect to see, that they're used to seeing, and there's a fine line and there's a balance. So that's a strategy. And that's something we've talked a lot about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So strategically, but I'll stop, and I do want to touch on the branding point versus like maybe talk about the different platforms, but I don't want to like throw it back to you for a second before I go there.
Yeah. So, well, actually, let's talk about branding, because then I want to talk about the analytics. And this is something that we look at very closely. So, let's talk about the branding first, and then we can go into the analytics, and we can just run with it after that and get really granular with it.
Okay, great. So when let's connect branding to also ad platforms, and let's talk about ad platforms at the same time. The big platforms are Meta and Google, and of course you have TikTok. We
Mhm.
don't do a lot with TikTok. We should do more. One of the reasons we don't do a lot with TikTok is that some of the tracking and analytics platforms that we use, in fact, a lot of the major ones, they don't talk real well with TikTok. It doesn't have the same, they're just not as connected as like Meta and Google. They're just so good on the analytics side, and we're going to get into that. So we're a little
Yeah.
more focused there. Um, Meta is clearly the branding king,
Mhm.
and but Meta has pros and cons. So the great part about Meta is we can, and same thing with Google, right? But with Meta specifically, we can target specific areas and radiuses. And I typically don't recommend starting wide. I like to start small, like pretty narrow. I usually like to run a campaign starting in only a 5 mile radius. Now, if you're in downtown New York, it's gonna be a 1/4 mile radius. So it depends on where you're at. Like if you're in Manhattan or something.
Mhm.
But if you're like in a standard kind of, fairly populated but not densely populated area, 3 to 5 miles. The less populated it is, certainly you could go 10, but never just go 25 miles. Especially now with as many aesthetic companies as there are,
Mhm.
we'll get into that, okay?
Yeah.
But anyways, all the targeting, all the options in Meta, which is good for advertising because we can target specific types of people that we want to see our ads. So great for
Mhm.
branding. Only a small percentage of those people that see our ads, right, are actually going to become a patient or fill out a form. But it's still great the fact that we can show that ad to so many people. So that's what I love about Meta. Um, I'll talk about Google and then come back to Meta if that's cool.
Perfect.
Okay. So what I love about Google is the intent. And this is the big difference. Meta is a relatively low intent platform. Like they're not asking to come in for Botox, right? They
Mhm.
didn't ask anybody for that. Meta's pretty smart. They've seen behaviors in that person on the internet. They're very good at like understanding your behavior. So they know they are smart enough to say, this is probably someone who might be interested, right? But they weren't looking for you. So a lot of times if they come from Meta, they have a lower intent. From a Google perspective, we're capturing people, of course, based on keywords. When someone types Botox near me,
Mhm.
pretty dang sure they have a high intent. They are, I mean, they're looking for that, right?
Yep.
We know they're looking for that. So when we take them to a landing page, and we could talk about this too, the strategy around, do you take them to your website? Do you build a specific landing page? Which is what we do. We build specific landing pages that are designed to convert at higher rates, and they do. They beat website pages. They'll beat your website Botox page by at least 100% statistically. We take them to a page that converts, right? We know that we're going to get a pretty good number of people that go to that page that then also fill that form out.
Mhm.
And then after they fill that form out, we know that the chances that they then also become a patient is fairly high. And we know what those statistics are across the board and by treatment category. And there's a difference between laser hair removal and wrinkle relaxers, right? But we
Mhm.
know what those numbers are. This goes back to the technology we built, Pulse, which is all the things that we did before we even started acquiring customers. Back to Meta, getting the benefit of the branding, but low intent leads. And there are ways to improve the intent of leads, but it is a global reality across all industries that leads that come from Meta convert at a much lower rate. So you get that great branding impact, but you may have to generate 10 leads to actually get a patient because most of those leads are not even going to answer your phone call. They're not going to respond to your text message. So you have to have an internal motion of someone who's doing that job. And the more committed to that job that someone is, the more actual patients you're going to get from Meta.
And we have shown that like by 300% growth in the last month, we have shown that the person that is responsible for working those leads, it reflects into your business. So it's very important when you think about your team members and the systems that you're setting in place too. And you always have to be looking at how are things performing? What are you doing internally? You can have the best ads team in the world and the best offer and all of your systems be working perfectly. And if your internal system isn't able to keep up with that and have that follow through, that's where you have to look at what's your consultation process look like? What did the phone calls look like? How fast are you reaching out to them that are outside of just the automated responses that they get in that lead form? And there's this beautiful ecosystem that has to be at play for success when it comes to advertisements and getting butts into chairs, as our friend Jared says all the time. You got to get the butts into the bus seats there. So
Right.
that's the goal overall. So before we move on with that and keep going, what would you say is the best place for people to start, with Google ads or with Meta ads? And it's and it's controversial. There's a lot
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
that argue back and forth with it. What's the answer?
Gosh, yeah, it's such a good question. I personally like Google Ads as a starting place, but it really does depend. Like I'm going to give it a 55%, vote.
Okay.
Um, but the downside though, and this is a stark, painful reality with Google Ads, is they don't want you buying brand keywords, okay? And they don't even want to see branded terms on your website. So to be just really straight about it, the number one search term in aesthetics is Botox near me. That's the
Mm-hmm.
number one keyword. Most people are looking for Botox. That's still the king.
Yeah.
And so Botox near me or Botox City, whatever city is, this is probably the biggest opportunity to generate leads in Google. And you can't buy Botox unless you are certified to do so. And you have to either be legit script certified, or I believe it's the National Association Pharmaceutical Bureau, I think it is, NAPB. You gotta be one of the two. And that runs about $3,000 to $4,000 per year, including your first year, to go through that process. So it's a little bit pricey and it's a little bit of a pain. There's some things they're going to crack down on, certain procedures which are a little bit maybe more experimental, like they're going to actually not even want to see that on your website.
Oh,
So
really?
there's a little bit,
Okay,
yeah.
so
So
even
like,
like we'll use
mhm.
PDGF as the example because that's a hot topic right now in aesthetics. So having PDGF listed on your website could actually hurt your Google ads, is what you're saying?
Well, it may make it so that you can't be legit script certified.
Okay.
And if you're not legit, no, you can still have it and it won't hurt your SEO.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
I'll
it's
get back
that
to what you said,
legit script.
because yes, but you may not be able to get it. And I'm not an expert in it unless where legit script comes in. You may not be able to get that certification.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't get that certification, you can't buy keywords like Botox or Juvederm or other certain brand names which are pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they won't allow you to do that, specifically pharmaceuticals. So that shuts down a bunch of your opportunity. But also, let's say you said, all right, well, I won't buy Botox. I'll buy the keyword wrinkle relaxer. Now you can do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that keyword does get searched. But when Google looks at your page, if they see the word Botox, even on your page, they won't allow you to buy that ad either.
Wow.
So this is the challenge. Now, can you buy keywords like laser hair removal? Definitely. Body contouring? Definitely. Skin rejuvenation? Definitely, right? So many other keywords you can buy, which still are going to
Mm-hmm.
convert well. And I like that about Google. I like it because it's easy to set these campaigns up. You're going to get very relevant traffic. It is expensive. The per lead cost might be $100, $200, but you'll likely convert 50% of them, 30 to 60% into a patient. So it's just an easier lift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Meta on the other side, what I like about Meta is the branding impact, and it's a big volume game. You can drive a tremendous number of leads on Meta. It's just right because the intent is different, so
Mm-hmm.
it really can be a very scalable channel. Um, but you have to have that sales motion in place
Mm-hmm.
with Meta. This is also why I was talking about how I think the clinic has to be of a certain size or sophistication to even do Meta. The other thing about Meta, and this is like you said, you got your Facebook page shut down. I see that every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I see people getting their ad account shut down, their Facebook account shut down. They don't know any better. Meta has these very strict rules or around how you can portray people, the copy and the language that you can use on their platform. Now, the good thing about Meta, you can say the word Botox on Meta. You don't have to have a legit script certification. You can have Botox and have an ad and it's Botox right there. We say it in the copy, boom, good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if we run weight loss as an example and we say something like, you can't even show it before and after, first of all, in advertising in any health
Across the
category
board.
at all, in
Mm-hmm.
all of aesthetics, no before and after. But then there's also these like even more micro nuanced rules, which are really, unfortunately, like they're kind of like they're hard to even interpret for most people. This is one of the dangers of doing it yourself. And I'm an advocate for doing it yourself if you've got the time to read the rules. But if you say something like, are you tired of looking fat? Or are you tired of looking overweight? If you're basically implanting negative emotions in people's minds in your ad copy, that's a very big no-no. So they don't want to see anything that's going to hurt someone's self-worth
Mm-hmm.
or that ever could risk even creating self-harm, which is a far reach. But the
Right.
copy matters. And so you got to be really careful. And we'll get your ad account shut down. And they may not even warn you. They'll just all of a sudden like, bang, ad account shut down. And then good luck trying to get a hold of Meta. If anyone's ever tried, that ain't happening.
Man. And if you have a connection, feel like you have the golden ticket because it is so hard to get a hold of them if something does happen, which is what we found back in, I think it was 2017. I mean, we're coming up on 10 years ago and things have changed so much too. So one of the things, and that I'm curious about, because this is also something that some people will say, oh no, you can have needles in your ads. Some people will say, no, don't put a needle, because back in 2017, 2018, if you even had a needle going towards somebody's face, it would get flagged and shut down. Is that still the case, or has that lifted a little bit with the rise in the aesthetics industry and popularity?
It has lifted a little bit. I do
But
think
not a
if
whole
that
lot.
needle's too close to someone, if that needle's too close to someone's eye, you could get shut down because it could look like you're trying to injure somebody, and that's kind of silly too. But like they will penalize that.
Yeah.
But I don't like needles in ads for what we found, and again talking about this tech that we have, which is looking across a lot of accounts at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Those needle ads don't really convert the best. Like
They,
we don't find that they convert the best.
they
So
don't give you a
that's why
fuzzy
we don't
feeling.
really use them.
Yeah.
No.
It's
It's not
not
exciting. I don't
inviting.
want to see I don't want to see how it works. I just want to see the result,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Yeah, and close your eyes and just let it happen. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, just
Yeah.
make me beautiful. Do whatever you need to do to give me that outcome. But we don't
Yeah,
we don't
that's
want to
actually
see the
the
blood and the
worst.
gore.
Right. Same thing on websites. I see it too. I see this, not to call anybody out, but there's one thing I'm thinking of in general where it's like their homepage hero image is this woman's head, and there's needles coming in at every direction, and like
Yes.
that's their go-to, and
That's
it's like that's not the go-to. That's not people aren't excited about that. Who's excited about that?
Yeah, I think that we get a little desensitized inside of the aesthetics industry because we're used to being around needles all the time. We're used to talking about medicine and all of these different modalities. And to us, laser resurfacing isn't scary. But to somebody who has never been in the industry or had any treatments done before, that's really intimidating just to say the word laser, of like, laser, does that hurt? Same thing with needles. You think of needles being like going and getting a shot from your doctor, not something that you don't think of like an insulin needle. You think of like these really heavy duty, like you're in a hospital needles. So you have to think about the consumer and where the consumer's at and what's going to be inviting, because at the end of the day, this is optional. This is not,
Yeah.
necessary medicine. This is a luxury service. And so we should be thinking about it and providing the service as such and elevating to that. Even if your goal is a Groupon style advertisement where you just have people running in your door constantly and you don't care what the retention is like, you still need to be advertising in that way that's looping them in, that's kind of reeling them into your practice. You can't be scaring them off with all these things. And I think that we inside the industry almost feel like we're more professional if we talk with the really big words and we have like all the technicalities and all the medical terms in there, but it does not land the same
Yeah.
way. You're at that point, you're advertising to other aesthetic practices in your area, not to your consumer that's coming in. You're just impressing your community around you, which if that's
Right.
your goal, I guess more power to you. All right, friends, this conversation was just too good and we kept the ball rolling. So we are actually going to make this a 2-parter. So join us again next week on the Bright Side of Beauty podcast for part 2.